Oh, I don't think that has anything to do with it being a JPEG or a TIFF or something. There's something else. I'd have to see what you're dealing with there. I'd have to see that file. I don't know. That could be a million things. Here's why. JPEG. It's an acronym for Joint Photographic Experts Group. Just remember that. No, just kidding. You don't have to remember that. This is a format that is simply used to compress, it's used to make images easy to send through the wire services, through a telephone wire, through some kind of cable, okay? Quickly to another part of the world, all right? That's what it's good for. It's good for sharing. It's not good for archiving. Why? Let's do this right now. Let's save as a JPEG to the desktop, and I'm going to open it up and show you what happens. JPEGs will average out. See, the more detail you have in a picture, JPEG doesn't handle that well. For example, beautiful blue sky right now outside. Nice gradation from dark blue to light blue. JPEG will take all that detail and average it out. So you'll have what's called banding or pixelation. You may not notice it in the highest quality JPEGs. But once you open a JPEG, save it, or work on it, save it, close it, open it, work on it, save it, close it, open it, work on it, save it, close it. Every time you do that, it averages out the information. So let's do this. Here we're zoomed in. I don't know if you can tell, but already, even at the highest quality JPEG, there's squares. You see those squares? See those squares? Now let's save as a TIFF here. Let me hit scan. TIFF. So what it does, by doing that, the file size stays smaller and it's easier to send. Okay, that's the only purpose for it. So the TIFF doesn't do that. The TIFF keeps all the data that you scan. Now, of course, depending on the quality of your scanner. Now, some scanners, sometimes I don't know, it's like they save it as a JPEG and then somehow it's converted to a TIFF. I don't know, it's very strange. I can't explain it, but this is what I've noticed. That's why you want full control. Now, as I zoom in, I mean, this is a clear example. Every square you see there is a pixel, 1 pixel. But when you go to the JPEG, you don't see the details of all those pixels. Do y'all see the difference or not? Raise your hand if you can tell. We got a few. All right. This is why. Oh, way in the back, he can tell. So that's. I think if some of you don't see it, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Just do what I say. Okay. It's like, man, TIFF, JPEG, this is boring, man. Yeah, but you see, if you do it like this, you'll have less problems down the road. You wouldn't believe all the pictures I get that other people scan, and that's all we got. And it's saved as a JPEG that they opened and resaved it, and it's just, and every time you resave it, close it, open it, the compression gets worse and worse and worse. Okay. Did I make my point? Good. So I scanned it in. Now we have this nice JPEG, TIFF. Okay, and it's got the color appearance. So the crack here. Let's just work on this real quick, and we go on to another one, because I see where it's never enough time for these things. It's never enough time. Now I'm using a program called Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop. Real quick survey of the room. How many of y'all have something called Adobe Photoshop, and you know for sure? How many of you all have something called Adobe Photoshop Elements? And how many of you have something called Paint Shop Pro? A few, okay. Yeah, Paint Shop Pro is a really underrated program. It's excellent. It's a Windows only program, but it's just like the big version of Photoshop, the expensive one. But in the meantime, if you're looking for something, I recommend a program called Adobe Photoshop Elements, or you can get Paint Shop Pro, which is by Corel. Paint Shop Pro, I think, is a little cheaper than Elements. Well, it depends. I mean, which is better as far as what? Complexity? You know, you talking about repiping the plumbing in your house or just fixing a leak? You know what I mean? So I would say Elements is a good place to start. And then you can move up to the higher Photoshop or to Paint Shop Pro. But still, Paint Shop Pro is a slightly different interface. What I suggest you do is go to the websites, okay? Yes, sir?
Now, when you load it from a TIFF file in Photoshop,
yeah.
Photoshop was different. There's a PSD file.
Okay, good. And that reminds me about the PNG too. Okay, PSD is called Photoshop format. Photoshop format is also a non-lossy, good format. The reason why I didn't say Photoshop format is some people may not have Photoshop. And especially in the future, when you pass these on to the next generation, maybe there'll be a problem opening it up. But TIFFs are more widely accepted, and they might last, you know, another 50 to 75 years or something in the future before being phased out with BIF format or something.
Photoshop, modify it, and save it back out as a TIFF.
Okay, so you have a JPEG already. You've saved a whole bunch of scans as JPEGs. Open them up in Photoshop when you get home. Save them as TIFF. Okay? And then when you want to send someone a JPEG, you save a copy as JPEG and send them the copy, then discard the copy. Throw it in the trash. Okay? PNG format. PNG is a web-compatible format that allows you to display an image with transparencies in it. That has a transparency. So if you have, you know, a logo, but you don't want the white background, you just want the logo, PNG format is appropriate for that. Okay? But I wouldn't, unless you're doing some web design work, I wouldn't mess with it. I wouldn't mess with it. I'd stick with JPEG. Yes, ma'am?
Could you repeat the name of that program you recommended?
Okay.
Download.
Okay. There's Adobe. Go to adobe.com or corel.com and COREL or Adobe, ADOBE.com, and try to get free trials. One other thing. You have the sheet with my contact information. There's also a mailing list you can sign in the back. Call me if there was something we discussed and it went by too fast, and I'll tell you over the phone. I might even email it to you, okay? All right, so just call me, email me, whatever, all right? Let's move on to this real quick. When you're working on a picture, in Photoshop, Photoshop Elements, Paint Shop Pro, you get something called a layers palette down here in the bottom right. See if it shows up. Good. And right over there. By default, every picture has one layer, and it's called the background layer. What you should do is duplicate that layer. So in the layer, up here in the menu, Layer, Duplicate. And what this does is this is not a duplicate file. This is a duplicate layer, because within a file you can have multiple layers. And if you don't save it and you close it, or your computer crashes, you lose everything, no matter what. But this allows you to work on one layer independent of another, and it's easier to make changes. Let's watch. I'll grab a handy tool called the healing brush. And I will hit Alt-Option-Click on a good area to tell Photoshop, look, I want you to remember this area. then I will put the paint